Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the PsyFi series, discovering the cutting-edge science and research in psychedelic medicine.
Hey everybody, welcome to another great episode of the PsyFi podcast, where I talk to leading industry experts, clinicians, and researchers to unravel the mystery that is psychedelic science. And today I'm joined by Noah Kraft and Belinda Tan of People Science. And thank you guys so much for joining me today on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Gaurav.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely. I think it would be really awesome for our listeners if you guys could tell us a little bit about yourselves and People Science and, what you guys are into in the psychedelic space today.
Sure. Noah, you want to get started?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Belinda. So I'm Noah Kraft. I was born on the East Coast of the United States in Maine to musician and an artist parents, and then had a wonderful run of education, and I'm trained formally as a Western doctor, an MD, and also a PhD in molecular biology. And I spent about 8 years of my career running what's called a translational research lab at UCLA, where I work on basic science research, translational research in animal models, and all the way into human clinical trials. And really learned about discovery and the scientific process through that experience. And then a few things started happening. A group of us, including Belinda, launched a telemedicine company. Then I was a chief medical officer for an enterprise healthcare software company. So I had this experience in clinical research, telemedicine, and enterprise software. And that led Belinda and I to our last company called Science 37, which basically took clinical trials and FDA-regulated clinical discovery and virtualized it. So instead of making patients come to the doctor, we brought that to the patients. And over about 5 years, we grew the company to a couple hundred employees, and it's now the virtual clinical trial leader around the globe, which became very important in COVID times. We left the company in 2019 and have been working towards launching People Science, our current company. I'll just say personally, about me personally, I come from very modest means and I focus a lot of my energy on important societal problems and in areas where underappreciated problems and underrepresented peoples need the help of science and medicine. And that's how I've chosen to spend my career. And People Science to us represents this confluence of our background in medicine and science and technology and entrepreneurship, combined with our personal convictions around the healing powers of complex medicines like psychedelics and medical cannabis. Medicines that have been taken away from scientists, especially for the last 50 or 60 years in the United States, but have tremendous healing powers that are recognized broadly, and importantly have been, a lot of them, not necessarily the synthetic ones, but a lot of the traditional natural psychedelic medicines have been brought to us by the very people that are underrepresented and underappreciated today. So People Science is really this wonderful professional, personal confluence for us to work on the psychedelic medicines and really help steward them back into responsible use by humans and understood. And we think of People Science as an evidence-generating company where the audience for that evidence is the people themselves.
Wow, that was a really amazing introduction. Noah. That was a really great, introduction into yourself and a really novel and noble mission that People Science is, engaging with today. And Belinda, I'd love to just, hear the same from you. Like, what's your mission and what brings you to People Science today?
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. That was great, Noah. I think Noah did a great job of summarizing all the stuff that you might see in our LinkedIn and CV, which is a lot of collaborations and partnerships on entrepreneurial efforts through tech, telemedicine, innovating clinical trials, and then up to now, people science. And I should also say we're partners in all respects of life, if it's not obvious. We have a child together. We have 2 kids, and we're spouses. So it's been a tremendous journey over the last decade of working together in this way. My background, I'll give a little bit of flavor that's not so much in the CV, so to speak. So I'm Malaysian born and immigrated to the U.S. when I was 4, and spent the chunk of my childhood growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in terms of my conventional academic work, I'm a clinically trained dermatologist and dermatopathologist, and my basic science background is as an immunologist. What's really interesting is how I've come here today doing people science. To me, feels like full circle of where I started when I left high school. And what I mean by that is when I left high school to start college, my intent was to become a neuroscientist and to study the brain and behavior and learning and memory, because that to me just blew my mind. The fact that you could break down what everyday people were behaviorally just based on these signaling pathways. So when I went to college, that's what I studied. I studied biology and brain and cognitive science. And then going to medical school, I actually started to explore what lab I would work in to get my PhD, and looked at some labs where we studied learning and memory in mice, and then also did some neuroimaging with frog adipocytes. Or did I just cut off there?
We're back.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just for a second.
Lost you at adipocytes.
So studying
Right.
frog eggs and neurons and imaging, and it was beautiful, but it was so disconnected from ultimately where it was going to be applied to the person. So I felt disenchanted, and I actually took time off from med school with the intent of dropping out, because at my core, I've always felt like I'm this artist, but I'm also a scientist. And when I took time off from med school, I volunteered and did a lot of work around Los Angeles with art galleries and also with some designers, and came to appreciate that there was a wealth of knowledge that I, as someone who was going down the pathway to study science and medicine, could bring and connect to people in my community. And at the time, it was people who were in the creative world and in art. So I felt value, and I felt like, okay, maybe I should go back to school and get those degrees, because I can actually do stuff and help people. So I went back to medical school, decided to shift toward immunology, which is a really beautiful biological system, and got my PhD in that, which is what led me to become a dermatologist. So all that's to say that it's strange, because I went down this path of becoming a dermatologist, but yet today I'm involved with trying to advance clinical evidence and research in the psychedelics and mental health and tech. So how did that all come together? And to me, it's because of that history of what's always been at my core and what I've been interested in. And what's been a common thread is that I've always been an explorer, curious, and I felt like my creative mind is where I thrive. And what is really cool, I came across this quote by a scientist named Jay Bernowski. And what he says is that the connection of the creative mind between a scientist and an artist, it's actually very much the same. And what's beautiful about a scientist and an artist is that we find 2 things in nature and find a likeness between them. And it's like this moment of aha. And I thought that justified why my seeming interest in art and science came together. And then, of course, this exploration of wanting to know more about, how do our minds work and how does that all manifest? So long story short, here I am today, first generation. As a Malaysian Chinese, my background is very much in Eastern medicine. So I grew up drinking strange brews, if you want to call it that, and salves, that my mom and her grandmas and all of those people passed along. And then when I entered the world of Western medicine and all of that conventional training, it was so disconnected that I feel we have such a privilege right now where we are with psychedelic medicines today and all of these plant-based medicines and alternatives, we have such a wonderful opportunity to finally be the bridge to bring that knowledge together and enable us as people who come from countries far and wide here in the West to start to bring this knowledge, to the general population.
Oh, that was really incredible. What a story both of you guys have. And I completely agree, Belinda. It sounds like your journey is the perfect like a symbol for psychedelic medicine and this juxtaposition of art and science, like your journey to get to where you've gotten really opens up the avenue for us to explore creatively into medicine and into healthcare and how we can be just more connected with each other and kind of combine these, this disconnect that you talk about. I'm first generation Indian myself, and so I completely understand the going through Western kind of education and allopathic training, working with a lot of physicians like I have in my time, and then also kind of understanding that psychedelic medicine has a lot of its roots in Eastern culture, and tradition. So it's really cool to see you guys put all of these together and just to see how the psychedelic landscape is evolving with a lot of different companies and a lot of different people with different missions. It's really inspiring. I'd love to hear about what you guys are up to right now at People Science and what the focus is primarily at the present moment.
Yeah, it's good to lay out some of the fundamental beliefs of what we believe in and what got us here. So, we're both formally trained as Western doctors and as scientists by PhD training. And we generally believe that science can be a universal methodology and process to bring the truth forward. The framing of questions for science can be wildly different. So Western medicine frames a lot of things as body, brain, a little bit of mind, whereas in psychedelics, we're thinking about body, mind, heart, spirit. And in Eastern medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, the framing of the body and how things work is very different. However, science can be used as a universal methodology to uncover the truth. And when it comes to alternative medicines, there's a lot of anecdotal, historical, traditional, and cultural knowledge that needs to be really processed through the lens of like, what is the truth, how best to transition these into more modern responsible use. And so at People Science, we feel this responsibility to take our scientific background and bring it forth to the people, to work on things that people care about and work on outcomes that the people care about. So in our past experience at Science 37, our last company, the audience for our results was the FDA and the EMA and regulatory bodies and pharmaceutical companies. The audience for our work at People Science is the people and healers, physicians and guides and people that are doing the work. In general, like many people in the psychedelic space, we believe that healing can come from within. And those around us are guides to help that process, and the medicines are tools to help that process. However, science can be used in a lot of ways to generate evidence and uncover the best practices and best processes to use these medicines. So that's one of the fundamental beliefs of what got us to shift from traditional randomized controlled trials with the FDA to a broader evidence generation platform that we use at People Science. The other fundamental belief that kind of overlaps with political forces and things like that is we believe in this fundamental freedom to inquire. What does that mean? It means that, in general, we have this, right to the pursuit of happiness, and we have a lot of rights and freedoms, especially in the United States. But the freedom to inquire and to ask what works best for me is a freedom that is not talked about that often, but that's a fundamental principle of People Sciences. We help people answer the question, which alternative medicines work best for me personally? And that freedom is fundamental to both the science and to the political movements around decriminalization and medicalization of these medicines. And if you focus your thoughts around, well, what does that mean to inquire? It's just to simply ask that question, what will help me back to my path to wellness?
Yeah, that was awesome. Belinda, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. I'd like to also add that what's very maybe not obvious about how we're viewing the vision of people science is that because we're navigating now in this space where consumers, the people, are already purchasing products involved, well knowledged in an anecdotal sort of way in what's happening, because we're operating in this space, we're essentially trying to build a new way of seeing health and wellness from the ground up. That's different than our conventional world of medicine and science. So, for example, in much of medicine, a lot of the new treatments are brand new compounds or molecules that have never entered the body of a human being before. So there is a lot of value and necessity in how things are done in such a regulated way. We need the FDA and all of these agencies to protect the public health. At the same time, these are structures and institutions that are just not built for how human beings for thousands and thousands of years have been already intervening with our wellness and health. So we're meeting this clash of cultures here. And for us as professionals in this Western world, I know, Gaurav, you also have a background in science, basic science.
Yeah.
It's really hard to bridge that distinction. And it's also really hard when you're a scientist to reject, because as scientists, we know that there's always a truth. And today, what is a paradigm, tomorrow will be completely disproven. So we have to keep in mind that while it seems like there's these two worlds that don't seem to communicate with the same language, there is some commonality, and it's that human beings are involved. So what we're very excited about with people science is because we're operating in this space of alternative medicines where consumers are able to make the choice and we can operate in a people forward sort of way, we can actually have a lot of freedom to navigate how we're doing the research and clinical evidence generation and designing how to do science in a way that is just not the way we do in Western medicine. So another important point too is that this is the world where the legal, the social, and the political is up in front right from the beginning. Unlike, say, the CAR T, very advanced genetic type of medicines. That's just all science, and it's beautiful, and it's going through all the testing that's needed. But that's not the case where we're operating right now. We're out there in front of the people, the public, and it's a very different place to navigate. And we need to, for that reason, always prioritize the people before everything else.
That's amazing. And I really love the name People Science. And I love even more than how much you guys stay true to it, because you're right, there's a really big divide when it comes, and I think even more sometimes for people that are practitioners or are trained in Western medicine and allopathy to try to understand where that independence and autonomy comes from, when it comes to finding your own path of healing and finding your own pathway to health, and then understanding that there has to be regulatory bodies that govern the use of drugs and what's safety and efficacy, and kind of finding that balance between the two is really difficult, for practitioners, I think, especially sometimes. But when it comes to psychedelic medicine, that's a conversation that really needs to be had, and for a scientist that's heard the majority of my career, anecdotal evidence is not evidence. Well, when it comes to psychedelic medicine and the thousands of years of use that they have, it might not be the standard of evidence we're used to, but it's significant, absolutely. I think you're going to say something.
Yeah, well, I think you bring up a great point in your reflection on what we're saying is that people have been experimenting and working with these medicines for millennia, and in modern times, for decades themselves. Like one by one, we are choosing these medicines, and guides and healers help us. And from a scientific perspective, the criminal thing about it is that we haven't been very good about writing it down for legal reasons. And so one of the key tools of scientists is documentation. Writing down what you did and being methodical about it so that over time you can actually draw conclusions about what you did and what it means. And at People Science, the biggest shift of what we're doing is the scientific paradigm. So we're building a system called CHLOE, which stands for Consumer Health Learning and Organizing Ecosystem. CHLOE is a technology platform to allow people to study themselves. So when you're doing experiments with yourself to see what works best for you, you're answering a solitary question: what works for me? Then, as scientists, when we aggregate and pile up all these people doing a similar protocol with themselves, that generates the broad answer: do these medicines work broadly for the public? It's a different form of evidence, but it all starts with just simple tools to document what you're doing. And Western physicians have been awful about writing things down, and individual people don't have the tools of science to document what they're doing. So we're simultaneously building Chloe as a tool for the individual to answer the question: does this actually help me in things that I care about, whether it's cognition or trauma or anxiety or sleep or anything that you care about for your own wellness? And then as scientists and as a company, what we do is we anonymize and de-identify that data and aggregate it so that it answers the question: does this medicine do what the creators of that medicine or the hypothesis generators, does it do what they think? So it's a two-sided organization. Our primary interest is to help people answer the question: what's working for themselves? And the secondary business side of it is to help society answer the questions and generate evidence. Do these things work as we say they do? Are they safe like we think they are?
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, go ahead, Belinda.
Yeah, I want to add also to the model of science and how to think about it at a high level. So we're talking about I don't know how many data points of anecdotal evidence that we can arguably say is sufficient to support this type of conclusion compared to the gold standard randomized, controlled trial. So when we're looking at the former, think about it from this lens of public health. So, for example, the public health evidence behind how tobacco smoking leads to lung cancer. That was not done as a randomized control trial with human beings. It just, animal studies, yes. But what happened over time was through the thoughtful collection of data over the course of many, many years and thousands of people, it became irrefutable that this was a cause. And so when you put yourself in that framework of how to think about data at scale, population-based, also thinking about the thoughtful way of collecting that data and studying it, we can lead to some, very insightful knowledge about these medicines outside of the framework of what is the gold standard of clinical research.
The last thing to say about the scientific paradigm, Gaurav, which I bet you appreciate because you mentioned it earlier, is the FDA process is built around single molecule late stage disease outcomes. Like, does this single molecule cure cancer or cure a specific type of cancer? That's the way that the FDA randomized controlled trials are organized. Psychedelic medicine, some of them are ancient and very complex, like ayahuasca has multiple plants. Each plant has multiple different molecules and active ingredients. Medical cannabis has hundreds of active cannabinoids and terpenes that all are very active on different parts of our body. The FDA process isn't very well organized to study complex plants in a complex environment, meaning set and setting of psychedelics just standalone deserve decades of research. Music, setting, who the person is, who the guide is. So the FDA process isn't currently organized to do that. And we think of ourselves as a friend to the people and a friend to the FDA to help shepherd this evidence generation forward so we can actually learn about the complex systems and recognize some of them might not be distilled to single molecules ever. And that's the benefit of them, is they have what we in cannabis we call an entourage effect, but in some of these things, they have very complex interactions with itself and with our body, mind, spirit, and heart.
Yeah, that was an awesome point you brought up, actually, because I know a lot of us have come into this field from cannabis, and that whole single molecule versus the entourage effect thing was the big, to me, I think one of the big reasons why drug development never really took off in the cannabinoid space. Of course, our understanding of the 5-HT2A receptor is just way deeper than perhaps our understanding of our endocannabinoid system will ever be, or at least in the near future. We tried to make synthetic drugs that mess with that system, the endocannabinoid system, and we failed miserably. Just because cannabis is safe doesn't mean messing with those receptor systems is necessarily safe. And taking those molecules out of context, like THC or CBD, of course, CBD is found to be efficacious in treating childhood seizures and has EpiDLX now. But outside of that, like really, it seems the entourage effect is pretty fundamental to the therapeutic qualities of cannabis. And what's really curious about what you brought up is, well, we're talking about set and setting, and that's kind of its own entourage effect when it comes to psychedelic medicine. That changes every time, you know? So there does need to be some sort of platform that allows for the expansion of that single molecule paradigm, you know? And it's really cool to think that you guys are providing that, you know? That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward, what are you guys really excited about, you know, in the future? What are some of your plans for, I mean, you talked a little bit about Chloe. I think that's super exciting. What else do you guys have under wraps that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I think, you know, don't want to overrepresent where we are. We're very experienced, seasoned entrepreneurs from our last company, Science 37. People Science is a new startup. We hope to close our seed funding round imminently and have some great investors behind us. But there's a lot of work to do. So there's building trust with the people, building the community of engaged people. And when I say people with a capital P, I mean you could be a consumer buying an alternative medicine product. You could be a patient to one of our doctors, or you might be a research participant in one of our clinical research studies. So those different roles, they all hinge on trust. And so building our company and the trust with the engaged research participants who are interested in this space, that's going to be part of our launch. Building Chloe so that it's a really wonderful tool to help individuals answer those questions, like what's working for me. There's a lot of technology and know-how to building Chloe, because it, you know, can be regulated by the FDA or by other regulatory bodies. So there's a lot to do, and building the team. So, you know, we're just getting out of the gate. We have a wonderful team of advisors and some part of the founding team, but there's a lot of people to hire, and hopefully people see our vision and are inspired by it and want to join. Like I sometimes have this fantasy of, like, there's People Science, the company, but the community is so much bigger and more important. And I think of it like a alternative medicine science core, like CORPS, like the Peace Corps, but the science core for people that are interested to contribute their experience, so that the knowledge and wisdom of the psychedelic evolution that we're going through right now is more properly understood by the public.
That's really cool, and I can really relate with your guys' mission in that regard of wanting to take science to the people, you know, and kind of take it out of the ivory tower that it's been in with just academics for all this time, you know, and that's what really inspired me to get involved with science media, because I love doing stuff like this, you know. This is what, I mean, it's a great way to connect with everybody, you know, and really bring science out of the ivory tower and out of the laboratory and off the shelf, you know, and give everybody access to it.
Yeah.
Belinda?
Yeah. In our prior experience at the two other companies we were helping to grow and found, one of the major themes was trying to get out of the box, to have the courage to not create the business processes that are like reverting to the mean. So for example, Gaurav, to your point of institutions, it became pretty clear that the reason why we were successful in our last company with virtual clinical trials, and in particular increasing the diversity of participants in our studies, which was remarkable, it was because we had the courage to step outside of institutions. Despite a lot of our colleagues and peers being those exact type of investigators, scientists, and physicians, we work with them. However, we are now doing research outside of those formal legal structures and all the financial drivers that make you want to work at an institution. We stepped out of it, and I think because of that, we were pleasantly surprised and really quite impressed with how much reach we could get to the people and to the public. And for example, some of our studies, we were able to recruit populations of demographics that were exactly the mirror of what you see in a particular region. So for example, if you
Wow.
recruited for a trial in California, you were going to get 40%, Latinx people and 20% Asians. It was really, really wild to just step out there and just go straight to the people.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. No, yeah, I want to let you jump in there too, because like what you're talking about, Belinda, is one of the biggest issues we need to solve in psychedelic science right now, is that almost the entire populations being studied are white males, and how do you translate that and extrapolate that to everybody? So what a cool thing you guys have already been doing and are able to help facilitate. Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to pile on that notion, like the notion of what we call people forward. It imbibes everything we do at People Science, from building Chloe to make sure the primary user, meaning the consumer or the people, the experience for them is the best experience, not the experience for the doctors or for the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera. But it all stems from this notion of bringing the tools directly to the people, bringing the opportunity directly to the people. It turns out that there are wonderful people out there in the middle of the United States, all over the world, that don't have access to Stanford and Johns Hopkins and UCLA. We believe those are wonderful institutions. Our friends and colleagues work there and they do incredible research. However, the silos that they built mean that only those with means and access to those institutions take part in the research or lead the research. As you know, traditionally most researchers are white men, and most research participants are white as well, and people of means. And so we find that when you have the courage to break down the silos and yet still collaborate with people inside the silos, you can bring these things out to the people. And to me, it's not necessarily better science. It's more extrapolatable, more meaningful science, meaning the results can be applied to different populations, different set and setting. And that is really going to be important in psychedelic science, is making sure all the voices, both indigenous peoples and modern scientists, people of all walks of life, classes, colors, ethnicities, races, are represented in that process. And in today's modern age where technology can reach the people, it seems almost unethical to not bring the opportunity to the people. Like, if you're going to be doing this type of science in today's age, you should do everything you can to reach everyone.
Yeah, and I want to add also to reemphasize the point that we value our system of institutions and the regulatory agencies. And we also value that there's this giant ocean of people outside of them that are also the human population and need to be part of and need to contribute to our knowledge. So it's really just that. And I think in how we're thinking about the science, we have still friends and peers working at the major institutions who are asking us, so what are you guys doing with people science? What does that mean for us as clinicians? And unanimously, our friends and colleagues are thrilled that we actually are contributing to the knowledge that they're lacking. They have trainees, so medical residents, fellows, and patients who are asking them, for example, all about the cannabis products, CBD. What should I take? I don't know where to go. And doctors, as we know, are not educated in that. And it's only now just starting that medical schools are educating their students about the endocannabinoid system. And now we're also seeing a lot of our friends who are mental health providers, many of whom practice outside of institutions in the community itself. They're asking them about MDMA and ketamine and psychedelics. And this is happening here in Los Angeles, where some of these are, these products are not legal, but some are legal. So the people are asking about it. And we as healthcare providers want to help them. We want to be there for them. They depend on us. We went to school with credentials so that we could support them. So we need to now, as scientists, support these healthcare providers so that they can continue to be the shepherds of care for their patients and clients.
It seems like you guys are building a really sophisticated system, and there's going to be, like a user base that you talk about that is the people, the people that are out there. There's going to be a platform for clinicians and healthcare providers. There's going to be a platform for the FDA and regulators to be able to access this information. So clearly you have a lot of work ahead of you to build something like this. How is that going to look, I guess, in your mind, and how are you guys approaching this this task?
Yeah, very, very thoughtfully. There's a lot to do, and it's one of the many reasons that Noah and I decided to take the role of co-CEO. I think as entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurs, you know that there's just too much for one person, no matter how much you delegate. So it's a real partnership, and getting all of those done, prioritizing our strategies and what to put capital in first versus not. I would say at this stage, in terms of how we're thinking about priorities, it's how to build value for the people and for the community as number one. And within that, it's also doing the research. All of the other things like providing some knowledge base that is a growing resource of knowledge that's further along the road. And then also working on how we can be involved with policy. There's a really critical juncture right now in the psychedelic medicines. We know that this happened with cannabis many years ago, but where can we help as the scientists to contribute to how policy can move in a direction that's more meaningful, for the psychedelic space. So how we're thinking around that. In terms of how we're setting our priorities for the Chloe prototype, we are at the top thinking, what is the consumer and what is the individual person going to get out of this experience? Yeah.
I'll layer onto it, Gaurav, that your question is spot on. Like, we know it's an audacious vision, and there's a lot of work to do. We also believe that it's a needed infrastructure for discovery, especially in the psychedelic space. Just for semantics sake, we've chosen to broaden our kind of target areas to what we loosely just call alternative medicines. Psychedelic medicines, both traditional and synthetic, are a big part of what we'll work on, but medical cannabis and cannabinoids, probiotics, nutraceuticals, nootropics, even digital health interventions like mindfulness apps. These are all things that intersect with each other and have very complex intersections in the mind and spirit and kind of wellness in general. So our efforts in building a societal infrastructure or a new scientific paradigm, they require building things that are important to the people and explaining that all the way up to the very top leadership of countries. So in our prior experience at Science 37, we had direct conversations with the leadership of the FDA. Janet Woodcock, who's now the acting commissioner, she went to bat for our innovations in virtual clinical trials. And so we got to know the very top leadership of regulatory agencies, of companies, and now our vision for people science includes building things for the people in a new scientific infrastructure. And we recognize we have to put effort in all the way up to the policy level and invest in those legal and regulatory kind of efforts.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's absolutely a bold and audacious goal. But if there are ever two people I think I've had on my show that would be ready to do it and have the experience and the passion for it, it definitely seems like you guys. And you guys are a power couple for sure. And it's been such an amazing time having you guys on the show. And as we come to an end here, I always like to give my audience my guests the last word. So a message or a thought or maybe an idea that you wanted to share with our audience. I give the mic to you, Noah, and then to you, Belinda, or whoever wants to go first. I would love to have you guys just have the stage.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer by just vocalizing something I've been meditating on lately, which is the notion of coevolution of animals, and in particular humans, with plants and fungi and other organisms, microbes, for example. we've co-evolved all these systems in our body, receptor systems and nervous system, et cetera, alongside of plants and fungi, et cetera. And it's no wonder why they're so powerful to us broadly, not just make you feel slightly different here or there. But why can we smell flowers in the spring? Why does cannabis have hundreds of active molecules we can sense and interact with us? The psychedelic medicines are so powerful and yet so complex. And so I've been meditating on this notion that as humans or animal organisms, we've co-evolved, and for the past centuries, we've kind of ignored the endocannabinoid system and our olfactory system and how we sense the whole experience of life. When springtime comes, it's no wonder that the smells of spring tell us, oh, it might be time to go out and meet someone to start a family with. And so we kind of ignore these deep parts of our body, and I'm looking forward to applying science to really help us uncover our co-evolved selves, if that makes sense.
I love that. Help us uncover our co-evolved selves. Cool. Thank you, Noah. I appreciate it. Belinda?
Yeah. There's a beautiful quote that I heard in this journey of getting into the psychedelic space, and it's that life is soul school. And I think that has meaning in so many ways. And I don't know who to attribute it to. So whoever said that, thank you for that. And it has a lot of meanings. And in one framework of meaning, as it relates to education and life and learning, I think it captures also that life should be school, meaning not only working within and on your spirit, on your mind, but also life should be school where you're learning about your body and your health and your wellness every day. Education is actually not about learning dogma and then living life for the rest, for the remainder of your life following that dogma. It's about having critical inquiry. That's what education should be. And to put yourself in this mindset that you can be observing, you can be learning, and you can be integrating what you're seeing and observing into knowledge. And I think that where we're encountering so much rigidity in life, whether it's psychological, social, personal, it's that we're fixed in these dogmas and we're not letting us keep an open mind that life should be school and inquiry and constant learning every day. And that to me is the true principle of what we want people science to be, is that all people should embody that feeling that life is about learning and it's about putting science into your everyday wellness.
Oh, that was beautiful. I was just watching Science of Psychedelics. We have a CME course through Microdose for clinicians, and Dr. Zelfan was talking about rigidity versus the flexibility of the DNM, the default mode network. And that was just a nerdy thing I remembered based on your amazing end of show message there, Belinda. So I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate having both of you guys on here on PsyFi. It's a conversation I've been looking forward to for a while. And I'm really grateful we could have it today. So thank you guys so much. This has been another incredible episode of the PsyFi podcast, where we talk to leading industry experts, clinicians, and researchers to unravel the mystery that is psychedelic science. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Noah Kraft and Belinda Tan, co-founders and co-CEOs of People Science. Thank you guys both so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for letting us share, Gaurav.
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. It was a pleasure.
Yep, until next time. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Thanks for joining the PsyFi series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.